I got a gift, so I'm okay with the car, and I'm
I'm Shubhash Sarkar, and this is my car. This is a Ford Endeavour 3.2 litre automatic, titanium. I've had this car for 3 years now. This December it'll be 3 years, and it's driven a fair bit. We've been across a fair bit of India. Of the 43,000 odd kilometers done with this car, barring these 4 major trips out, and the rest of it mostly urban circuit. I've been consistently and fairly happy with this car in the last 3 years. It's not given me any reason for complaint. It's a solid vehicle, steady on the roads, expectedly thirsty for a 3.2 litre 5-cylinder engine. But that apart, there are no problems whatsoever. It's got a very solid undercarriage, rock solid stability. It never does give me more than 9 kilometers per litre in the city. And I'm talking about a Noida-Gurgaon circuit. Fair bit of traffic in between in Delhi. If you stand still, if you're caught in the traffic lights or caught in some kind of a jam, this can go down to as bad as 6. If you avoid congestions, city route will give you up to 9. If you take this out on the road, this climbs up immediately to 11, 11.5. And if you hold a steady throttle, if you're not gunning the engine too much, it can even show you up to 12.5 on occasions. But I kind of accept the fact that it's anywhere between 9.5 and 11 at best. So average 10. 9 for the city, 11 for the highway. It's got a 10,000 kilometer, whichever be earlier, service interval, which is fair enough. So far, having covered 40,000 kilometers, I've clocked 4 services. There are gaps in consistency, service quality consistency, or even dealer flow consistency. A couple of occasions, I've had to escalate matters where the dealers would not do it to my satisfaction. I've had a very good experience with Harpreet Ford, but they're in Gurgaon, and they've been good. Riddhi Ford was good, but they shut down. Gautam Budh Ford is the closest to where I stay, and I would have been far more relieved if their service standards were a little close to what I expect from Ford India. I wouldn't rate it bad. I wouldn't rate it as bad as the market thinks of it, but there's room for improvement, definitely. Having said all that, in the last 3 years that I've had this, there have been very few reasons for me to take it other than a scheduled service. I had a puncture on the road, and when I took out the standard toolkit from the boot, the spanner in fact didn't fit the lugs. I told this to Ford. They gave me a weird explanation that the lugs apparently, these batch, apparently expand on high mileage running. I've never heard of wheel lugs expanding with mileage. I can't have my wheels not opening up if I have a blowout. A little bit of to and fro, but they changed all the lugs, all the nuts on all wheels. My first service was 6,000 or less. Since then, I've never actually had to pay more than 10 or 12K for any of my services so far, and that includes consumables. Service costs are not bad. Wherever I've had to change them, fortunately they've been covered under warranty, but I always check what would I have to pay if I had to pay for them. Like the wheel lugs, a set of, they have 6 lugs per wheel, so 24 lugs is 7.5K. That if I had to pay, I'd be sweating. I always research my vehicles before I buy them. Transitioning up from my Yeti, I wanted to get back to a body-on-frame vehicle because of the nature of my holidays, which is usually a fair bit of rough roading. I have 3 dogs, so I needed a slightly more spacious car at the back because they travel with me a couple of times or more a year. I test drove the Ford. And immediately after the Ford, I jumped into a Fortuner, and I drove that too. Now, the reason I did not eventually go with the Fortuner, although the Fortuner seems to be the choice of SUV for people in India, were a couple of things. One, I wasn't a fan of the way the dashboard looked. I wasn't a fan of the displays. I wasn't a fan of the overall swoopy design. And beyond that, while the Fortuner did impress me with its acceleration, it seemed that the gear shifts were a little snappier in that, but brief impression. I wasn't a fan of the ride. Straight off the bat, I could feel it. I drove both the vehicles on similar surfaces, and straight off the bat, I could feel the Fortuner was a little lumpier. And that's something I didn't want to settle for. Ford obviously had a lot more kit for the price. The sunroof seemed like a brilliant idea. It's not. It's just a cosmetic thing. Sunroofs mean nothing in India. I barely ever use it. Other than that, a whole lot more kit.
When you say kit, you mean features?
Features. Vehicles, you run it till...
Hi, this is Rajesh from Ecardlr. This Endeavour Ownership Experience Review is part 1 of a 2-part series. Hope you're liking it. If you are, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe the channel, press the bell icon for notification, and do leave your comments as feedback helps us to improve. Thank you very much. Happy you're doing it.
At least 7 years. I'd rather have a better driving experience overall in the 7 years that I have the car than worry about the eventual resale value. So the Fortuner has a stiffer suspension. It rides a little harder than the Ford. Given a situation where you're driving over road rumblers, I know the Fortuner was a little skittish. At certain speed, if you're doing it over 60, it felt like the ride was harder. This filtered it out. The ride was much smoother. It didn't swerve from the trajectory. This is the It's written about 4x. It's a permanent 4x4 by the way. That's one difference between this and the Fortuner. The Fortuner is part-time 4x4, which means you can actually switch it to 4x2 and a 4x4 mode, which also probably makes the Fortuner a little more frugal, a little more fuel efficient than this because the front wheels unlock. This is a permanent 4x4, which also eats into its mileage a little bit. Ford calls it TMS. It's a standard full-time 4x4, which means it's all the time 4x4. This is an electronic transfer case. By default, it's in this road position. That's a normal position, good for most surfaces. Then you can switch to snow, mud, grass. This is sand mode, which is desert. And there's rock mode. But for rock mode, I have to shift to 4 low. There's the 4 low button. You can hear the higher rev. That's because it's on sand mode. When you put it on sand mode and lose sand situation, the wheels need to spin a lot more so that they don't dig in. The RPM goes up. They always keep it at a higher RPM. Quite the other way in snow mode or a grass mode, it'll drop RPMs. At least that's how it's supposed to work. Having an all-time 4x4 is a little bit like having an all-wheel drive car. To me, it means traction levels at all wheels, at all corners, are continuously being monitored for change, which means the car is always more in control than a two-wheel drive car. It just means a safer car for me. It's a 5-cylinder 3.2, which is, to begin with, an odd configuration. It's got 198 bhp to be exact. It's got close to 500 Nm of torque. It's got one of the highest torque ratings in the SUV category of this class. So combine all that, you have a lot of power from the 3.2, you have a lot of torque and pulling power from a 3.2, but then you have a lot of weight to pull up. And add to that non-DSG gearbox. It's not the best shifter. I mean, after a while I get used to it, so you kind of adjust your driving to it. Although Ford claims that it's a self-learning gearbox, I don't know what that means. Apparently it senses your shift patterns or driving patterns and eventually learns to shift to your liking. I don't know if that's happened. I frankly have not registered it. But I've always felt there's a little bit of a lag in the shift, which means if you really want to get away fast from a line or especially from standstill, it creates a whole lot of engine noise. So you hear the engine getting a little loud at this point. But once it picks up, once it's shifted beyond the second, the movement is very fast and the shifts are cleaner, no noise whatsoever. So I would say N-gear acceleration would be very good for a car this size. I mean, if you're moving in the range of your low 40s, 30s, and you really want to pick up and sprint, the car will surprise you with how much speed it can pick up in no time. And it won't even indicate how fast you're going given the noise that it makes. Gearbox is a little sluggish in the first 2 cogs, but you can see now how quickly you'll hit 100. And if you have your windows rolled up all the way, you won't even hear the car.
But the car is kind of uncomfortable at lower speed.
It pitches, yeah. If you go over bumps.
No, I'm not talking in terms of just pitches.
Huh?
Pitch could be a factor of the suspension and maybe the height and all that. I was talking more in terms of it kind of groans that you're trying to pick up too early or whatever.
So that's a bit about the transmission. Actually, it used to be worse. Then last year I got the TCM update, the transmission updates. And it started shifting a little better. It gets audible. It's not that it's giving any lack of power. I mean, you feel the RPM goes up a lot in the first gear. And it's not shifting quickly enough into the second. So you feel because you're hearing a lot of audio input from the engine. So you think the car's stressed. But then your senses through the years and what you see on the speedo don't correlate because you actually picked up a lot of speed. And the only thing not matching is the gear that you think you should be in. I mean, you think you should be in third by now, but you're still not past second. So I wish it shifted a little quick. Maybe it's geared for not quick getaways, but smooth getaways with load at the back. If I take off gently, the car shifts much smoother. But if I floor the pedal from 0, it'll make a lot of noise before it hits second and beyond and starts getting smoother.
Is there a diesel lag?
No lag. Here you go. There is no lag to speak of. I've not felt a lag over here. The turbo kicks in pretty early and I'm driving pretty sedately over here now.
It has a roll.
It has. You'll feel it on lower speed. On open road, it's smooth. It's like rock solid. You're cruising at 110 now and the road's not perfect. But you see what I mean. No roll, no pitch. It just rides smooth. My comfortable cruise speed is between 100 and 120. I don't like straying beyond that point. The fastest I think I've seen in this car is 150. And at that point, I didn't think it could go much above that, frankly. It would maybe top out at 150 or maybe 160 at a push, but I don't think it can see much higher than that because it pretty much redlined. Probably they have limiter. The Yet feels way safer at 180 than this feels at 140. It feels far more in control. I like good all-round visibility. I don't like my vision impaired on drives. A lot of cars tend to have that. Like rearward vision in this is splendid. I mean, It's a high car. If it had a windscreen at the back which was any thinner than this, I'd have a problem. But the rear camera is fabulous in that sense. It makes backing all that easier.
How would you rate driving pleasure of this car?
Oh, 515. Driving pleasure is not a problem. Not a problem at all. I haven't had to make unscheduled stop. I'm in the hills. Like I said, the only problem I have is around the bends, the A pillar and the mirror section. But barring that, no complaints at all. Driver, passenger. Curtain in the middle, curtain in the left middle, and curtain at the rearmost right and curtain at the rearmost left. That's 6, 7 knee. Driver's knee airbag. That's 7 airbags, a lot of active and passive safety tech. There's traction control, there's ABS, there's EBD, electronic brake distribution, which means basically when you're braking in an emergency, it'll distribute the brake pressure on the wheels depending on what kind of surface it's going on, or if it's skidding, or if it's rotating. I've braked from really, really high speeds. It's not skittered, it's not broken the line. Braking is not a problem. Is it sharp? No. Is it adequate? Yes. But if you're going at steady speeds like this, you hit the brake, it'll feel like it's not stopping as quickly as you desire. You have to put a little more pedal pressure. For a first time user, for a new user, you might be wanting a little more brake weight.
And safety?
It's as safe a car as I can drive.
So number please.
515. Ford loves to go to town saying built tough, Ford built tough, and I believe them. This is a 3-year-old car. You hear a squeak rattle? I mean, you're in the car yourself, right? No squeaks, no rattles. And I've been on a couple of bumps. I'll go over a bump here. Nothing from the suspension. The car would have been a lot quieter if the tires were a little newer. A little bit of drumming coming from the tire, but you're not feeling it because the audio thing is on. The cancellation's on. So it's really built well. I'll give you one other example of built stuff. The car was brand new, barely 2 months old. Like I was at an intersection like this, and the car came and T-boned me from the right. I mean, he just hit me, and he was piling onto our side of the lane. I was not even sticking out. We of course discovered he did that because he was staring at his phone while hitting an intersection, and he hit me at speed. I mean, he was at least at 40 when he hit me. And I got down, and of course the first thing I looked at was my car. The front right fender had crumpled, and he hit my right wheel, front wheel square, so the wheel had broken. But that's about it. His car was totaled. It's lucky that he lived. I mean, that hit totaled another sedan, and all I had to look at for damage was a crumpled fender and a broken wheel. Going by that T-boning I just told you about, it's 515.
But the build quality rating?
515. Fairly tall guy. Getting in this car is not much of a problem for me. But at the same time, having said that, it is a very high car. And I've noticed older people, slightly shorter people, find it a bit of a challenge gaining entrance into the car. My in-laws definitely struggle getting into the back seat, and very often they have to be helped up in spite of solid grab rails on either side or all corners of the car. Younger people who can't leap into the car, the footboard helps, but definitely not an older person friendly vehicle as far as ingress and egress is concerned, because there's a fair amount of distance between the seat and the road surface.
Ingress, egress, rating on?
For me as an owner, I don't care. For me, it's a 515. For this particular model, it's a 2016, 2017 model. This came with electronic adjustment on the driver's side. That's the only seat which has electronics. The 2019 model, they have electronic adjustments in both front seats. The adjustments are pretty fine, so they don't just zip back or zip up. It's pretty gradual, so it's fairly easy to find a comfortable spot without having to pull the vehicle over. It's an 8-way, so that's front and back. It has height. It has recline. As you can see, it's pretty gradual. I would prefer a little more seats below my thighs because it would just mean that much more support on long range. The seat scope needed to be a little larger for a person my size. If you were to ask me to rate this on 5, I would probably give it a 4 or maybe 3.5. Lumbar support is good. Lumbar support is basically the support for your lower back, and that's very important. There's this lever here. If you push it all the way down, there's a section in the seat which presses against your lower back. Side wall string is good. It holds me in place even when I'm taking sharp curves. Cushioning is very good. Not too soft, not too firm, just right. And I've stayed long hours in this car, like I said, 14 hours, 15 hours, no problem. 4. It's a pretty wide windshield. If you viewing bang on front, not a problem. I've had problems around the hill bends because combined with the A pillar, if you close this, you have a fairly large rear view mirror. So you have if you triangulate this, there's a fairly big section which you'll lose sight of when you're cornering, when you're going around the bend. Same on that side. Even the hood, while I'm talking about the view outside, angle of slope on the bonnet of a Fortuner is far steeper. It's far straighter than a Fortuner. So if the road rises, you see a lot of hood, not a lot of road. That can get scary if you don't have an idea of the corners of the car. The headroom is a little compromised if you're a tall person, and that's because of the sunroof. Sunroof needs some space to slide in. If I hit a bump at speed, I'd probably crack my head. Legroom is fabulous. If I'm driving, my twin is sitting in the back, and both of us are plenty okay. Thigh support, again, there's room for improvement. If I were to do a journey in this seat, I'd be okay, I guess. I'd not be asking for more legroom. This seat is reclinable, I know. It's a 3-seater. Let's see. If I were to sit in the middle, I'd probably be sitting like this. So I'd be stealing a little bit of my left passenger's foot room and a little bit of my right. Because if I sat like this wouldn't be comfortable. It's a 2-seater. Honestly. Me with 2 more of me? No.
Give me a rating on the rear seat.
4 out of 5. On my trips, I'm usually packed to the grill. There's a sleeping bag, sometimes there's a tent. There are definitely 2 very large size rucksacks for me and my wife, and it has never been wanting for space. When I saw the car, one of the things that sold me on the car was I asked them to lay the middle row flat too. The middle row and the back row, the last row, folds pretty flat. And my acid test was if I lay a sleeping bag down, my head was touching the front seat. Do my toes fit in, or do they get amputated on the rear hatch? They didn't. I fit perfectly in, and I could lie comfortably. And then I have the sunroof, and I was starting to imagine, me camping in a starlit night. So that was perfect. That sold me on the car.
Overall comfort of the car from inside.
Very comfortable.
Give me a rating.
I could swear by that.
Give me a rating on that.
5 on 5. Comfort on this has been always beyond my expectations. The design flourish, you will notice, it's a typically honest, straightforward design. Straight lines, not much flourish here or there, just a couple of bulging, flared fenders, and that's about it. Fairly straightforward bonnet, minimal fluting. I actually prefer this grille to the 2019 grille or the 2019 air dam. It has a little amount of design flair along there where the fog lamp insert actually swoops down and connects the 2 fog lamps. The new design is a little tame for me, but that's subject. That's about it. It's a pretty straightforward design. I love the design of these alloys compared to the newer 2019 model. Newer ones, again, in keeping with the newer design update, is a little tame. I like how the roof rails are recessed and not sticking out. It's got a little swoop down, like a little coupe-ish thingy. If you see it on profile, I like the lines. I like how it extends beyond the windscreen, the rear windscreen, and it's got a certain amount of continuity on it. I like the little blacked out C-pillar. But if you go to the rear, Ford could have done better. When you see an Endeavour from the back and when you see a Fortuner from the back, even with those crazy slatty lamps, the Fortuner looks more purposeful. The Ford always looked a little like hunched up. It's a little tight-assed. It could have looked a little wider. The rear seems to swoop in from all ends, from the top because it's sloped, from the sides because of these scallops. So it kind of finishes like this, tapering smaller end. I wish it looked a little butcher. The rear looks a little tame. If I had to give an overall rating, it's still 4.5. This is the only negative in the design. There's no other design flaw that I find. So if I were to take away 0.5, and that too is a little 0.5 away from the rear, the rest of the design is superb. I mean, I love it for the looks. This again is what I like in SUVs. Straight lines, very butch, nothing swoopy. Something I don't like in the Fortuner. No tapering things. Straightforward air vents. They deliver well. They do not have unnecessary flourish. I don't like this. The buttons are too small. Cars need to be designed with more user-friendly buttons, large buttons. These are tiny buttons. I mean, the only thing I remember are these 3 buttons, auto, AC and AC on. So I'm not a fan of this section. It also is a little bland, this whole grey thing. It could have used, in design sense, it could have used a little more relief, chunkier buttons, but that's me. Display is fabulous, one of the best in the business I've seen, both in terms of touch quality and clarity. Layout, Ford is very proud of this. I have mixed feelings. I mean, it's digital, right? The RPM meter is there. There's a lot of information you can scroll through from here, including inclinometers and power distribution, where the vehicle power is going, front wheel or back, and it has distance to empty, of course, that's standard. It has pitch and roll indicator. These 3 dials, when you've switched on to the off-road mode, on the display at least, the first dial tells you if your car is pitched forward or pitched backward. It's showing you a 1 degree pitch forward, which means the road is a little sloped ahead. So car is actually like this. The middle one, 0 degree, means the steering's dead on. Like the steering is absolutely set to 0. The wheels are neither left nor right. And the last dial is the roll, which means my car is tilted 1 degree towards the right. Steering design is fantastic. It's good, chunky. I don't know if it's leather, but leather feel grip. The buttons initially look like overdone because there are too many buttons, 26 I think. But once you kind of get used to it, it's pretty intuitive. It's not that bad. The cruise control buttons are here. The audio in terms of phone or in terms of music buttons are here. These are the buttons that control this screen, where you want to be in the entertainment screen or the audio screen. Overall, I still prefer round dials. I like classic round dials with maybe a MID in between. It's nice. A lot of people like this. I'm not a huge fan. I could control the music from here, from the buttons. I could say what song I want to listen to, and it'll play me that song.
The beige and black interior.
I would prefer an all black. If you ask me to rate interior design with user-friendly features and everything, I would give it a 4 on 5. It's a 3-zone, which means you can individually control the temperature on the driver's vents, the front passenger's vents, and the rear AC. It has temperature control over here and a blower control over there. AC now, and I'll go to the climate screen. So you have dual controls over here. So the setting on my vents are 23 degrees, and if you're feeling hotter, if the sun's on you, you might want it lower. So I'll reduce yours to 20. And you see the blower speed when I paid 33 lakhs all told when I bought. By no stretch of imagination is a value for money. So frankly, there's no call for value for money. Am I happy having spent that money? I have no regrets.
Value for money in terms of entry cost.
So I would have been happier paying less than 30 lakhs on this.
Value for money in terms of service cost.
There's value for money in the Ford parts. Ford service costs are really among the lowest right now.
Value for money in terms of resale value.
When I sell this car, my friend's Fortuner will probably outprice this of same age.
The parameters put together, rating and value for money.
3.5.
Convince me to buy this car.
If you need the space, if you have a lot of friends, if you have a large family, if you like to travel out of town, you can't do better than this car. You don't mind paying considerably higher gas price.
Convince me not to buy this car.
Don't buy this car if you're going to be just driving around in the city. It takes up too much space, it takes up too much fuel. I find it very tough to park this kind of a size in today's crowded streets. Guys, I hope you enjoyed around my Ford Endeavour that we had. If you liked what we did, how we covered the car, do subscribe. It's a good one. Hit the bell icon, do subscribe and get reminded on other content which comes up in the future.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Pleasure.